But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Be a kind to the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. Hello Adam. Hi Adria. Badger, I think we've met in comments, haven't we? Good to see you here. Let's see what we've got. Oh, I haven't even scrolled down. This is such a... There are like 700 videos on this playlist because I don't watch half of them. And I don't remember to take out the ones that I do watch. I usually do this before I start. So, hang on. So much bullshit in this wild bullshit playlist of mine. Oh, wait a second. We're actually at the bottom of it. Neat. Let's see. We've got some loser box stuff. We were looking at him yesterday. We've got Pim Tool. Israel attacks Beirut with massive strikes. Targets Hezbollah leader. Tim Pool debates Andrew Wilson on human rights, divine mandate, and God's will. Oh, that should be enlightening. White Dudes for Harris post hilariously cringe ad. Tim Pool and Matt Rose roast them. I mean, like that. The title, the name of the group already, I will say, does seem cringe. But I have a feeling Pim Tool and Matt Walsh will massively exceed that cringe level. And then we've got some Darman crap. We've got Bully doesn't know Poor Kid is a rap god. Inspired by Eminem. Ooh, it's PG-13. And Guy finds new family inside his house. So where shall we go? Kind of in the mood for some like silly bullshit. Personally. But I'm certainly interested in hearing your preferences as well, chat. See. We've also got Xander Hole is actually dangerous. Some liberal bullshit slop that showed up in my recommendations called the Unpopulist. Oh, okay, yeah, I was kind of curious about that one as well. Ask, what's so bad about populism? Like, my least favorite word. Well, it's got a lot of competition for that title, but it's such a useless word. It's such a bullshit word. It's mostly used. Let's see. Maybe Well, let's check this one out first. We'll look at Pim Tool and Twat Mulch on White Guys for Harris. I mean, this will be a cringe collision. That much is clear. There is a certain level of jabroni stacking going on.
Oh, man, you're making me do it. All right. Here we go. We got this tweet from White Dudes for Harris.
Hey, white dudes. Well, I mean, they are the whitest dudes. I mean, let's just say, anytime you have an
Proud to unveil
organization
the very first ad from White Dudes for Harris. We're
that
coming
is
together.
like specifically for white people, that's always going to be fucked up. Let me just say that much. Like, this is not a good thing, actually.
Poor Kamala Harris, focusing directly on talking to white dudes about our role in this election. This is just the beginning. We're showing up, speaking out, and standing for what matters. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to unmute this because I didn't want to.
Hey, white dudes. So, I think we're all pretty sick of hearing how much we suck. Every time you go online, it's the same story. We're the problem. And yeah, some white dudes are. Trump and all his MAGA buddies are out there making it worse.
Oh, wow, this is what I'm talking about. This is undoing so much fucking anti-racist education right here. Like, it isn't some white dudes, it is white supremacy. Like, literally everybody who benefits from that is going to be part of the problem. Unless they're like, except to the extent that they are actively trying not to be. Like, this idea that it's just some white dudes and it just happens to be they're all Republicans. Yeah, that's not how that works. This is what I'm talking about. This is exactly the sort of shit that I was expecting, and yeah, not good. Okay, so let's go.
Shouting nonsense in their stupid red hats and acting like they speak for us when they don't. All they've ever done is screw us over. But if you're not on the MAGA train, where do you go? Isn't it just swapping out one crappy option for another?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
And it hit me. This isn't about picking teams. It's about who's got a plan that's gonna make life better for me and my family.
I mean, it's really great, these graphics, when you keep in mind that the Biden administration has restarted collections and late fees and shit on student loans. Like, just in time for the election. Like, are they trying to lose this? Is this another fucking, the producers thing going on here?
So I've been doing my own research and decided to check out Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And before you jump down my throat, they're actually talking to guys like us.
Oh, wow. Finally, a candidate who talks to white dudes. And doesn't lecture them on racism. They're like, that's so wonderful. Like, this is absolutely, like, this is, like, painfully cringe. Like, the fact that,
No lectures, no BS. Just real solutions that protect our freedoms and help us take care of the people who matter. And honestly, I think Harris and Walz are the ones to make that happen. End of the day, you're your own man. It's your call. But if anyone gives you crap about it, tell them it's none of their damn business.
Well, so that explains why the Teamsters are backing Donald Trump.
I think whoever wrote that commercial has never met a white man.
I mean, I think whoever wrote that commercial has actually met one. And is actually very specifically, that is very specifically trying to market this to the sort of white dudes who actually don't want to talk about the racist shit that they do. And the fact that those are the people they're trying to appeal to. Like, this is... See, you'll hear, like, all these sort of, like right-wing Democrats talking about, oh, well, what you gotta do is you gotta reach out to these guys who would vote for Trump. It's like, the number of people who are by default going to vote for Trump and would switch is so much smaller than the number of people you are turning off by trying to appeal to a bunch of racists who are undecided.
I just don't think they have.
It's a commercial for men, like written by women. You can already tell. And but I don't know. It speaks like they said damn, they said crap, they said BS.
No.
I love like Twat Mulch has got his fucking lumberjack outfit on here. Who's she now? I mean, other than being a gelfling. Like, is she here to pick up the Dark Crystal or something?
BS, no nagging GF.
I mean, I feel like if they wanted to make an actual ad, it'd be like, hey.
Oh, that's nothing. That's nothing weird at all going on here. Look at that nice big iron cross behind Tim. That's not a dog whistle at all. Yeah, and yeah, I know that is something that's like a brand logo. But in this particular context, on a fucking podcast that regularly has fucking neo-Nazis on it, that is...
That would be it. Like, nobody's got time, nobody... We don't need to...
Cut to the chase.
Don't waste my time.
Kamala's even married to one of us.
But, you know, it's funny because you said it's written by women. And you ever see that comedy bit where a guy says, so a buddy of mine... You know, he's having he's going through a divorce and things have been rough, and you know he's I guess he's gonna get back to dating, so we go golfing. When I come home, my wife says, "So how is he?" And I go, "I don't know." And she's like, "What do you mean? And weren't you golfing together?" "Yeah." "Well, is he seeing somebody?" He goes, "Didn't come up." She's like, "You don't know anything about your friend?" And he's like,
"Yeah, I mean, that sucks actually." It actually sucks that toxic masculinity has managed to, like, push a lot of guys into a corner where the people they have people they hang out with, but they hardly know anything about them because they don't talk about shit that matters.
Like, we don't talk about it. Like, that bit was funny to everyone because they know guys aren't going and meeting up and talking about these things. Hey, you know, Kamala Harris, she ain't lecturing guys like me, white dudes like you, we should go vote for her. They're going to be like, what are you talking about, dude? Shut up. The game's on.
But again, the writer's room has never met a white man. They don't know them at all. And the white men that they hang out with are completely compliant to their will. I mean...
Oh, God. They're completely compliant to their will. Like, literally, this is meant to target Tim Pool's audience. I mean, that's exactly who this is. Because they're specifically going after shit that white supremacists like to get white guys mad about.
The thing is, Kamala Harris wants white men to vote for her, and I know this because they're now courting Mormons.
Wow, you think she does? That's such a fucking innovative analysis there. That yeah, I'm guessing the reason that she's got this cringe ass group called White Dudes for Harris is that she's trying to get white dudes to vote for her.
In Arizona, Mormons overwhelmingly white, and they're trying to say, no, she represents your values better than Donald Trump.
I just want to point out this ad is paid for by Beige Rainbow Pack.
What?
What is that? Beige.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, chat. Have you ever heard of a beige rainbow? I mean, that sounds like some like straight pride bullshit.
Rainbow?
They're just making fun of white people.
Seriously.
Sounds like a... I mean, to me, it's the ad sounds like it's like in the style of like an anti-drug commercial that they would show you in high school. That's trying to sound really cool and
hello, fellow youths.
Right, exactly. Or it's I mean, I don't know.
You mean like all of your fucking content sounds like that? That's what you're picking up on, Matt. It sounds like your content.
It was made by women, but it's the kind of ad that some liberal woman will show her boyfriend because she thinks that he'll like it, like that kind of thing. But even in an ad that's supposed to appeal to men, you notice that the first like 15 seconds are still dumping on men.
Yeah.
They can't even appeal to men without
going, except it isn't. It's actually like trying to paint white dudes as the victims. That's the idea. And then it sort of switches that around and says, yeah, actually, see, you can say that you did your anti-racism if you vote for Harris. You know, like, that means that you're not part of the problem.
And some men suck. We all know that. Like, let's just
Well,
get that out of the way.
I mean,
Men are terrible.
like, this motherfucker, if he's got a mirror, he knows some men suck. What's this lumberjack bullshit? Like, where did he get this? Where did he get this, like, pre-stress shirt? What was he doing that they called him in from, that he was wearing this, like, serial killer-looking shirt?
But, by the way, and then they get into the whole thing. So they can't even appeal to men without dumping men.
I don't know if you could make an effective ad for men in general for Kamala, because she doesn't offer anything substantive to a man. And let me clarify that, because you may be saying, sure, but what do you mean? I mean, if I was going to
Yes,
make
what do you mean?
an ad that was literally about apolitical dudes who are sitting there, they don't want to be bothered, I'd be like, hey, you guys remember when Donald Trump called Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig? And they're going to laugh. They're like, that's funny. And it's like, that's all you...
How is that a fucking ad, though? Like, what? So the ad is just, hey, remember when Donald Trump called Rosie O'Donnell a fat pig? End of ad. That's great. I mean, he should totally... He's missed his calling. This is what he should be doing.
You need to do. The guys are going to be sitting around, they're going to ribbing on each other, they're joking, they're crude, they're crass. Kamala doesn't have anything that's going to make a guy laugh.
But also the problem
see, I personally think that he's never gone out into a forest without arranging an alibi.
Into is that there is no room in the country where any white men are sitting around talking about how they like Kamala Harris. Like, men will talk about politics. I talk about politics all the time. But just that would never happen. Like, you would never be hanging out with other guys and like, hey, Kamala Harris, she's
like, okay, but I mean, why? First of all, I don't think that's necessarily true. Like, but I don't think the kind of guys that this is meant to appeal to are going to suddenly change around. First of all, because it doesn't actually say anything. It says she's got solutions. Well, what the fuck are those? Like, what solutions? Like, it doesn't actually say anything. And, of course, that is the style of political advertising in the U.S., to avoid actually talking about what politicians intend to do, because then you end up having a discussion about what people think should be done, and the whole idea of, like, electoral politics in the U.S. is to make sure people do not, under any circumstances, start having their, start like discussing with each other their own ideas about what ought to happen, because anybody who reads the polls knows that what most people think ought to happen is the exact opposite of what rich ghouls think ought to happen.
He's presented a great plan.
Yeah,
It's definitely not.
Her rhetoric is all about like safety, and I'm safe, and I'm your mamala. And women will flock to that.
Yeah.
Men don't.
I think she's pretty intimidated by men. I think it's interesting that she won't sit down. Number one, that she picked Tim Walz, who is soy as you can get, as her.
See, she could have picked, like, it doesn't matter who she picked. They would be saying that he's soy, because that means nothing. That is just, like, any guy who isn't outright an explicit, like, white nationalist, they're gonna call soy.
To repeat, and then every time she tries to, like, say she's doing an interview, it's with female interviewers, and they're always mostly allowing
But the
her to
governor
ask the
is her
question.
appeal to white guys, by the way. She's like, well, this guy, like,
She clearly understands what appeals to white men.
knows how to eat a turkey leg, but also will put tampons in a men's restroom. Like,
But look at the interview thing she did where she was like, do you eat food? And he's like, I have white guy tacos. And she's like, what's that? And he's like, beef. And she's like, what is that, tuna and mayonnaise? And he's like, beef with cheese? She's like,
Yeah, I mean, like, that is literally a thing you can order in some places. I remember going to a taqueria in Chicago, and they had, like, that was a menu item, the white guy taco. Well...
Do you season it? No. Like, is that supposed to be endearing to white guys?
I don't season my top.
I love that Command Sergeant Major abbreviates to CSM, which in the southern cone of South America stands for Conche Su Madre, which is like, fuck him.
Tacos because I'm a stupid white guy.
Also, well, that's the whole claim that this is a side thing, but the claim that white people don't season their food. It's like, where did this? Speak for yourself. I don't know what.
I put fucking salt on all my food. Sometimes I've even been known to spike my stuff with vegetable oil.
Matt,
Here's
are you familiar
with
with
Indian food?
Are you familiar with the East India Trading Company?
Yes.
Like, white people.
Yeah, let's talk about the East India Trading Company. That'll be great. Let's talk about what the East India Trading Company did to India.
People massacred hundreds of thousands to season their food.
He finds this hilarious. Yeah, look, they all think that's great, and yet, I mean, the joke of it though, Tim, is that the motherfuckers who sent the East India Company to invade and occupy India, even after that, still ate the blandest shit ever.
You're crazy about spices.
I mean, it literally was not until, like, after World War II when people started taking Britain up on this. They had something called right of abode. The idea was, you know, in exchange for being colonized by Britain, you had the right to move there. If you could somehow make it all the way across the ocean and go there, and assuming you wanted to, etc. And after World War II, the place was absolutely wrecked by German bombing. A lot of reconstruction to do. A lot of people still hadn't come back from the forces, or they were wounded and stuff. They needed workers. And so a lot of people started coming, and that's when food in Britain started to get flavor, actually. I mean, apart from desserts, they're good at desserts in Britain, I'll give them that. But, I mean, if you look at the sort of shit that was, like, normal British eating up until then, I mean, it's painful.
Literally will kill for our spice. That's how much we like them.
Black peppercorn was, like, the most valuable substance.
Oh, wow, that's some serious seasoning right there. Some fucking ground black pepper. I mean, I'm not knocking black pepper. I use a lot of it myself when I cook. I'm a fan of black pepper, but if that's like the pinnacle of your seasoning universe, if that's your final seasoning boss, you really need to get out more.
Put pepper on it. It's like, okay, it's
we season our food. I use pepper.
Oh no! The funny thing is, he was lying because he actually had some award-winning casserole recipe with cayenne and garlic.
Yeah.
And,
That's a really good. That's a good point. We fought and died for spices. Damn it!
No, you didn't. When the fuck did you? Like, also, apart from everything else, the East India Company. That wasn't the U.S. That was Britain. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? We fought and died for spices. I mean, and talking of hello, fellow kids, now I'm seeing, with those jeans, this is meant to be grunge. He is looking like one of those anti-drug ads specifically for when, like, Gen Xers were in high school in the 90s.
Take spices away from us?
Or they want to... But this is part of the lie that they engage in. You know, these woke, anti-racist, all these people you know very well, play this game where, you know, it was only like 7 years ago, a big talking point was that white people have no culture. This was a huge thing.
No, that wasn't the point. The point is that white as a term does not designate any culture or nationality or ethnicity. It is a term that literally only indicates somebody's status within a white supremacist society, which is precisely why the term expands and contracts as needed at different times. It wasn't that people who are classified as white have no culture. It's that they have a lot of different cultures, and whiteness isn't in itself a culture.
Thing they were saying, it's like, no, white people have no culture. This is culture. They point to, you know, other ethnic groups, and then it's just like, what are you talking about? There's a whole bunch of cultures from people who are white. What is that supposed to mean? And they play this game.
What that's supposed to mean is literally that that you don't understand what the fuck you're talking about. This being Tim Pool, I know we're all shocked that he wouldn't know what he's talking about,
They say white doesn't mean the color of your skin. It doesn't mean you're of certain European countries. It means you're the dominant social group.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why there are entire groups that didn't used to be counted as white, and then did. And actually, if you go in different parts of in different parts of the world at different times, what counted as white was different. I mean, depending on what the needs of, the society were, which is why a whole lot of for example, colonial South Africa in the 19th century took a very expansive definition of whiteness because they needed to make up the numbers. So they let a whole lot of people in that Europe, that a lot of other places were not letting into the definition of whiteness. Like Jews, for example.
Which is to imply that Chinese people are white in China. That's the argument they make. And I'll give you a funny one on this. We had a running gag on this show when Luke Rutkowski was a recurring co-host. Luke Rutkowski has blonde hair and blue eyes. He's Polish. And according to an organization called the Coalition for Communities of Color, Polish people are people of color.
Let's find out. Okay, Coalition. I've never heard of this group. Coalition. Never heard of this group. Chad, have you heard of this? Okay. Actually, they didn't say the Slavic community. They didn't say Polish people, they said the Slavic community, apparently. But, which is why, see, the thing is, this terminology, the thing is, yes, Slavs have been racialized in an adverse way historically. I mean, that goes back to, actually, even the Middle Ages, when it was very common to have Slavic slave laborers in the salt mines in Central Europe. But at the time, they were not using... Yeah, Polish is definitely Slavic. I mean, but the thing is that in Europe, the way racialization works is not the same as it works in the colonies. Because the complexion range is much narrower. And so they would go based on other things, which is why you would have racialization of which is why in fact a lot more groups are racialized who you would not immediately look at them and think that there was some sort of racist difference being made. So I mean, so when you put that into the language of communities of color, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. I mean, I would have said, if you're going to go that route, it would make more sense to say racialized communities. Now, to the extent...
So I'm sitting here, part Asian, and I don't count. I am not a person of color, and blonde hair, blue-eyed...
Well, who says you don't count? I mean, admittedly, you probably would do much... It probably is better for you, given the circles you operate in, that you apparently don't count?
White dude is a person of color. That's their logic.
I agree with the sentiment that, there's no such thing as white culture because it's just so broad and so absurd. There's certainly such thing as an American culture, and that's something I participate in. There's something as German culture, Swedish culture, Nordic culture in general. But to just paint Europe and the West with a broad brush and be like, well, you whiteys have your own thing.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I hate to be saying, I don't know who this guy is, but he's on Tim Pool, so he's probably full of shit in one way or another. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The concept of whiteness is just a subsumption of a whole lot of cultural and historical difference and stuff. Is beanie a race? Maybe amongst hats it is. Who knows what sort of hierarchies the community of headgear have made amongst themselves.
Sure, when you guys have not nearly as much in common with, the average German walking around as you do
But I think it's needlessly reductive. It's like,
oh wow, I mean Tim Pool hates it when things are reductive.
are white people who have certain cultural elements. When you come from Europe, there are certain things that are broadly shared, and there are certain things that are not.
Like imperialism. That would be one of the things that are broadly shared.
And it's just like, you can make the point you made. I think it's a point that, well, you can identify German culture, but I don't see. I don't know why they're so mad about saying, trying to make that a point.
I think.
Well, they're trying to make that a point because they're trying to explain how white supremacy works. That's why they're making that point. In fact, I mean, it is actually kind of baffling that he would have listened to this enough that he actually more or less accurately summarized the point that's actually being made. That if you listen that much, you would have heard an explanation of why that matters.
It's like, but you can't have it both ways. I think that's because they try to have it both ways, because they'll say, well, there's no such thing as white culture, and then they'll give an answer much like what you said, that, well, yeah, you break it down by where did you come from, and yeah, there's an Irish culture, there's a...
I mean, to name another group that was heavily racialized in Europe. And
okay,
but
then
for a significant
it's the same thing for black, because black is not, there's how many different countries could you come from?
Well, yes, but the thing is, there is actually, the result of being marginalized by Europeans, either in their colonial or their at-home version, is that people who have that experience of marginalization often it becomes a bit of a melting pot, and it does create cultures. It's why there is European Jewish culture that has a lot in common, even, completely separate from anything religious. Actually, white supremacism kind of gave rise to, black culture exists. It is very much a result of all these cultures coming together and coping with white supremacism from the uncomfortable end for a long period of time.
To qualify as black, according to our standards.
I agree with this. I was born in Ethiopia. There is an Ethiopian cultural identity, and that is separate from, I don't know what the hell black culture is, besides a ridiculously degrading and reductive thing to say, like, oh, well, I guess you're good at dancing.
You've lived here and you don't know what black culture is? Like, maybe ask some fucking people. Like, who do you hang with?
And basketball.
He's on fucking Tim Pool, of course.
Playing the bass.
Yeah, which, I've tried my hand in.
Are you good at basketball?
No, terrible.
Okay.
But the woke, these individuals claim there is black culture. It's hypocritical. It's paradoxical.
No, it isn't. It isn't. It's a different thing, actually. It is actually not the same thing, because there was, Africans from all over West Africa being brought together within this extremely racist and genocidal system, and a culture was born amongst them as a result of that, and as a result of their experiences within this racist society. That is a different thing.
So if we were going to say, well, okay, we're not talking about black culture, we're not talking about white culture, we're going to be more specific, so that the word culture has more meaning. Well, that's a consistent viewpoint.
It's a different thing. But
when it's kind of inconsistent, and we're just taking a whole swath of people and say, well, they don't have culture at all.
Which is not what anyone's fucking saying.
Although I will say, just to bring it.
You could look at anyone who's on Tim Pool, and certainly you could be excused for thinking they don't have a culture at all.
Back to the white dudes for Harris, and I made this point before, that the way that they're appealing to white dudes, calling them white dudes, all of it, it's very silly, it's ridiculous. I don't think it's going to work. I think it's laughable.
It says a guy who's made his entire living grifting to the most gullible white dudes.
But it is still striking that still the Democrats are making a explicit, deliberate play for the white male vote.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really telling, I have to say. Because you remember 4 years ago, they were like, at the same time as they were saying, no, we want to give the cops more money rather than actually stopping them torturing people and stuff. At the same time, they were actually trying to make some play to pretend that they were on board with, Black Lives Matter and, anti-racist critiques and stuff. If you go to, between 2016, 2020, if you look at their Twitter feed of the Democratic Party, their official Twitter feed, you'll see shit like retweet if you agree that no human being is illegal and stuff like that. And in 4 years, we've gone from them pretending to be down with, like, anti-racist activists and stuff, to them just outright trying to appeal to Tim Pool's audience.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Republicans, on the other hand, they would just never do that. They're not going to ever acknowledge white males as a distinct group or category.
They clearly just did. Like, I mean, that's the point of this fucking group.
Because they're scared of being called racist, or because they don't think it's worth their time because the votes are already coming in?
It's hilarious. They're literally talking about a video that is specifically meant to appeal to mildly racist white dudes, and they're acting like, oh no, they don't. They'll never acknowledge white dudes. It's like, yeah, because that's the issue of our time: white dude acknowledgement. I mean, we should begin every meeting in this country with a white dude acknowledgement. Just to add to the various acknowledgements we do that have absolutely no meaningful consequences.
I think it's both, but it's mainly the first thing. I think but they will say, I mean, you'll hear from any Republican, well, here's how we're going to help Black Americans, here's how we're going to help women.
Yeah, and it's complete bullshit, and it is actually meant. See, actually, that is a clever thing Republicans actually do, to sort of sucker white people who don't want to feel like they're white supremacists, who are trying to vote for them. And so they'll have like a couple of token black dudes with usually very bad haircuts, and they'll claim, they're gonna claim they have some sort of great solution for black people. Although you look at it, it actually is like, we'll take all their shit and put them in prison or something like that.
Here's how we're going to help Asians.
Well,
They'll say all that, and that's fine. But then there's this whole other category. Well, we're not going to specifically talk about how we're going to help those people. And it's just interesting that the Democrats are the only ones.
I mean, it must be so hard to be a rich white supremacist dude, and nobody acknowledges you. You're so fucking invisible.
Right now, of course, they're doing it in a really, insulting
And it's
way.
not that it wouldn't be smart for Republicans to do it.
Yeah,
The general point is just stop doing it. It's a really reductive way to just view this country and the complementary aspect of the most beneficial aspect of this country.
But the Harris Walls campaign
Which is the most beneficial aspect being what?
completely bent on identifying to people based on race.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason she's appearing at the...
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that you never hear right-wingers, like, you never hear the fucking Republicans do, it's identify people based on race. That never happens.
Hispanic conference today. She's talking to black journalists specifically. She's attending black sorority functions. I mean, she is obviously acknowledging that the Democratic organizers that are behind her see our country through the lens of race exclusively, which is interesting because they're also arguing they're the most unifying party.
Well, she's also mentioning in the debate that, Republicans need to get off of this whole race business.
Meanwhile,
yeah, and they do, but they're not going to because that is their fucking thing. They are the party for white supremacists who like to be explicit about it. And they're just very uncomfortable with the fact that now Democrats are just sort of, apparently they've decided to draw the final consequences from the Bill Clinton strategy, from the Hillary Clinton strategy that worked so well for them, and just really go all in on that.
It will only talk to you if you're circled up by race.
I don't know about who's going to win. There's predictions. They go crazy. Everybody thinks they know. But I do think that we should heed the warning of the left on this one. And that
I
is
can't wait to hear chat. What do you think he's going to say the warning of the left is? I want to know what you think he means when he says the warning of the left.
This country is inherently sexist. You know, they say it's racist too, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay. I mean, I would actually, quite a few liberals will also just say that, but I mean, yeah, it is, you know, racism and sexism are both in the fucking DNA of the entire regime, yes. I wasn't going to say, that doesn't seem like something that the left is warning so much as just sort of the basis for further discussion.
I brought up a while ago that I believe there's a component of the United States population that will not vote for a woman president. It's not just conservatives. Mary says her. But I believe there's Democrat men who are probably in their 60s who are like, I ain't vote for a woman. And they're Democrats. But they just
don't
wouldn't
say
do
it. They don't say it.
Right.
They don't even say it to themselves. But they feel it subconsciously.
I mean, they'll say it in private. They'll say it when no one's around.
Fucking hell, she looks like the Mirror Universe Jenny Nicholson. I don't know who the hell she is, other than, as I already said, a gelfling. But I'm like, okay, why is she, like, giving me this sort of strange recognition feeling? And it's like, oh, yeah, she looks like sort of, like, evil Jenny Nicholson.
I was sitting at a wing place the other day, and there was a couple of construction worker guys and things there.
Oh, so they're not paying. By which he probably means Hooters, the bland wings and sexual harassment place.
They were saying, you know, they would never say in a larger public context. But these guys were voting for Trump, the stuff they were saying. They were talking about capital punishment and how to get this country right. And I'm like, I know exactly who they're voting for. But they're...
well, I mean, the Democrats did remove their rhetorical opposition to the death penalty from this year's platform.
A bunch of Democrats who are probably older and don't want to vote for a woman. I brought this up, and these liberals called me sexist for saying it. And I'm like, well, how am I sexist? I'm
well,
saying,
I mean, you are. Like, you can just, how is he sexist? Well, you can just go back on this YouTube channel. You'll find plenty of footage of him being sexist. You can see exactly how he's sexist.
Liberal, that there's a component at some degree in this country that will not vote for her. And if here's what I wonder, if she's up in the polls by a point or two, but she could lose a point or two because there are a lot of men and women who will not vote for a woman because she is a woman. That's the liberal talking point on inherent sexism. How am I wrong?
I mean, well, I don't know that I buy that that's true. I don't think that many people have, especially on the left, have a compunction about voting for a woman. I don't know.
I'm saying that there are older people who are going to be like, I don't want to vote for a woman. And that number is probably significant enough. I'm not saying it's going to be 10%.
Would you vote for a female Trump?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Nice.
I remember there was some psychological experiment done around the 2016 election where they scripted a debate between a female Trump character, it wasn't said explicitly, and a male Hillary, and most of the respondents said they would vote for the female.
Yep.
Based on her
So
rhetoric.
it was NYU. There was this
yeah,
theory
but,
that...
I mean, that is like a really pointless experiment. Because everybody knows that they're not actually voting for these people, that they're not real candidates. The whole thing is obviously fictitious. It's pointless.
Hillary lost because she's a woman and people are sexist. So they said, let's do the debate, same lines.
No, I mean, Hillary lost because she was a horrible right-wing candidate, and all. But, I mean, she still would have won, except that the U.S. has the Electoral College and gives participation trophies to at least some election losers.
Spoken the same, performed perfectly by two actors, but the Trump is a woman and the Hillary is a man. And the end result was that people thought Hillary was a guy. It was a guy with glasses, and it was a woman in a red dress. And they said, that guy is too snooty and condescending. The woman was passionate and wanted to help us.
But a woman would never talk like Trump. That would never happen.
Oh, I mean, I've met some who do.
We were talking about that on the drive up here because we were talking about the Australian Office and how they gender swapped Dwight.
Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah.
They gender swapped Michael. They gender swapped.
Really?
Dwight.
Matt made the astute observation that there, like, a female Dwight doesn't exist.
No.
I do not actually know who Dwight is on The Office, but I'm going to guess that, by definition, Twat Mulch did not make an astute observation.
Like, it doesn't work, and I think that's the same with a female Trump. I just can't picture.
I also think there's no other male Trump. I mean, Trump is really unique in a lot of ways.
No, he really isn't. I mean, actually, he's just a Peña Nieto. He's just a gringo Peña Nieto. I mean, Mexico already had their Trump. It was Enrique Peña Nieto, scam artist, semi-illiterate billionaire who owned a whole bunch of media outlets and won in a seriously questionable election. Yeah, I mean, he was Trump before Trump was Trump.
Share his maybe values or ideas or interests politically, but you couldn't recreate Trump. I think it's a mistake to try.
I agree. It is a mistake to try. There should not be another Trump. Like, one is enough. In fact, one is already one too many.
Gender.
He's a very unique guy, but you can even look at a lot of
No,
his
he
personality
fucking
traits.
isn't. He's not a very unique guy. He is a type. All he is every fucking drunk right-wing asshole you meet at last orders who, or like waiting outside the pub, and all he wants to do is complain incoherently about Jews and immigrants, and how he has all the best ideas, but he can't articulate any of them.
And you can say, oh yeah, I know guys that are kind of like that, but you can't. Yeah, you can't do that. I don't know any woman who's anything like Trump.
Thanks for watching this clip.
I
from
mean,
Timcast
Sarah
IRL.
Palin?
Make sure to check out.
Phyllis Schlafly. There's lots of women who suck. Evelyn Matei. Okay, but that's the end of this one, and we've still got quite a bit of time. So we got some Darman bullshit. Got some more Tim Pool bullshit. We've got, let's see. U.S. officials make devastating admission about Gaza. We've also got Caleb Muppet watching wokeism. He puts a hyphen in it. Destroy American socialist groups. And we've got a movie, The Red Menace, 1949 propaganda film. Any particular preferences out there, chat? Yeah, this, And we haven't done Caleb Muppet in a bit. I think we're gonna do some Muppet. Oh, actually, it's tied between Red Menace and Caleb Muppet. Well, maybe watch a little of both, shall we?
Carter says, do you remember seeing the first roots of woke? Yes, there's a lot there, Carter. So let me, first of all right, so...
Oh, great. He's going to give us the first
George W. Bush was president when I was first getting politically active. And it was like the very end of the Bush administration. It was pretty clear the country was going to move leftward. Barack Obama had kind of made a national name for himself. At the Democrat convention in 2004, he'd given a speech that had really gone over well with viewers. And so I remember there were two events.
Like, okay, so Barack Obama is the proof that the country was going to move left? Like, what does he mean by moving left? Because, I mean, if you look at, like, polling, the country is consistently way left of the political class in the first place. But if you're talking about, like, the government, no, I mean, the whole point of Barack Obama was to make it look like that things were going to move left, because people were so fucking appalled with George W. Bush, who we're now supposed to remember fondly, that somebody who seemed like they were completely, who seemed to completely come out of nowhere and was nothing to do with Bush, was...
The U.S. Social
Rubes
Forums
would pay for it.
That were held. One was in Georgia and Atlanta, and one was in Detroit. And these were like little conventions for leftists. I went to both of them. I went to Georgia for the U.S. Social Forum, and I went to Detroit for the U.S. Social Forum. And I remember when I went to the one in Georgia, I was 19 years old. I had just joined the Workers' World Party, and they needed somebody to work the booths and hand out their leaflets at these gatherings that they had. And I remember that, all the communist groups were there, and they had their literature tables. But the bulk of the people that were at that convention, at the U.S. Social Forum, were not in any communist group.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is how a lot of these things work. I mean, a lot of these things, it's like, you have a whole bunch of people who aren't necessarily in an organization, and then a bunch of people who are, like, representatives of organizations trying to explain to people why they should join theirs. I mean, that's just kind of always how these things are.
NGO employees. And that was the first time I'd ever been exposed to this type of person. Right? There was, and it was weird because I'd be handing out leaflets.
Remember this guy, we actually saw this on stream, it's a long time ago now, really. But he explained that what convinced him that true revolutionaries wear suits was that he talked to a full-timer with the SEIU. This motherfucker is kind of cool with NGO types.
U.S. Social Forum in Atlanta. Oh, we're going to have a workshop and all this. And I would talk to these people, and they were, they had pink hair and they had nose rings, and they were older than me. Right? I was 19.
Wow,
and
even older than
I remember I would talk to them, and they weren't members of any communist group. They worked at Planned Parenthood. They worked at Students Against Sweatshops. They worked at Jobs with Justice. They worked at very...
Well, try to do that more nasally. They weren't... Like you got a wrong answer on a quiz show.
Like liberal activist paid gigs, paid jobs. The Sylvia Rivera Law Project was a group of transgender activists that I saw, and it was like there were all these people that were older than me that they were at this convention where every communist group was there selling their newspaper and literature.
Lots of other groups too, actually.
They were there, and they were working for these...
I didn't manage to go to any of the U.S. Social Forums or the World Social Forum, but I know enough about them because I paid very close attention to them, and, there are a million groups there.
Nonprofits. And they were not interested in the same things I was interested in. They were interested... They were all... First of all, they were...
Yeah, they weren't interested in LaRouche.
And they were wealthy. They were from wealthy backgrounds. A lot of them were lawyers.
Well, at the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, they had lawyers?
All of them. You know, a lot of them had worked at a law firm. There were a lot of law firms and a lot of liberal NGOs. And you talk to them, and they were for money, and they were very interested in LGBT, and they were very interested in, racial, like academic racial stuff, like black studies and
Jesus, this is like pulling teeth. He is taking forever to get to his point here.
The way racial oppression portrays itself in white feminist literature, or whatever you want to call it. And it was very academic, but it was also very, very, very not populist in its style, and it was very, very, what would be the word? It was very like, it was almost like tourism. Like they were interested in like...
Well, you were also doing, you were also doing fucking tourism. You were there to sign people up for a group that all they seem to know how to do is have A to B marches about things.
Obscure ways to be transgender. They were interested in...
obscure ways to be transgender. What's an obscure way to be transgender, chat?
Like Puerto Rican lesbians and how, like, the experience of...
Wait, so being a Puerto Rican lesbian is an obscure way of being transgender? Like, what the...
Puerto Rican lesbians is different than the experience of white lesbians, or, they were interested in this kind of weird stuff.
I don't think that is actually weird stuff if you are actually on the uncomfortable end of that.
And they were very, very... There were a lot of women.
What's
in
with
those
his fucking camera? Like, this is on 720. Does he deliberately set it at low quality?
Circles that were very
it's making me cross-eyed
all the time. That was the other thing I remember. I went to a workshop at the U.S. Social Forum. It was put on by the Committees of Correspondence. I was interested in communist groups. That's why I was at
the CWI.
There with the work.
Yeah. That they ultimately, in Britain they became SPEW, the Socialist Party of England and Wales, one of two highly abusive and exploitative pseudo-left cults.
Workers' World Party. I was interested in communism. I remember the Committees of Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism, which is a breakaway from the Communist Party. They had a workshop about what they stood for, about how do we move towards socialism in America. And I went to the workshop, and it was a PowerPoint presentation, and it was about how Republicans are fascists. Republicans are fascists, and they're dangerous and all that, and we have to defeat the Republicans. And then once we defeat the Republicans, once the Republican Party is just like demolished, which is not how a two-party system works, but once the Republicans are defeated, then the Democrats will divide between the pro-monopoly Democrats and the anti-monopoly Democrats. And the anti-monopoly Democrats will gradually start to implement socialist policies. And we won't...
okay. This is more of a fucking theory. I mean, I will say, I also don't think that this is a very good theory. History has not been kind to this theory of things. But it is more of a theory than he's got. I mean, his whole thing, all he can come up with is that you get communism when productivity goes up a certain amount.
Call it socialism in America. And there won't be a revolution. It won't be like a moment where, there's a revolution. It'll just be like gradually we'll get free healthcare, we'll get free education, and there'll be some like vague name for it, and it'll just kind of gradually happen. And like 100 years from now, we'll basically be living in socialism, but we won't call it that here in America, and it'll be really democratic, and it'll be really, it'll look nothing like communist governments around the world, and it'll be, it'll have a big emphasis on LGBT, and I remember sitting in that workshop, just thinking, what the hell is this? The Republican Party's not just going to go away, right? And I just thought the whole thing was weird, so I raised my hand, and I said, well, I mean, isn't there an issue? It's not an issue of defeating Republicans, it's an issue of, like, power, and what about the state, and stuff like that. I raised my hand and I said this. After I spoke, before they answered my question, this woman behind me, who had a nose ring, spoke.
Oh, well, if she has a nose ring, that's already self-discrediting.
And she was like 10 years older than me. And she spoke, right? And she had a nose ring, and she had like short hair that was like, combed over her head. Wasn't purple, I don't think. And she's, I'm so triggered by that guy's talking about power and authority. I don't want anyone to have power and authority.
Yeah, I'm going to guess. I would love if somebody were to somehow locate the woman he's caricaturing here. I just have a feeling this is exactly not how this went down.
Authority over anyone. It's like she's about to cry in response to my question. I'm like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, what's wrong with this? And she's up there, that's what scares me about communist groups. And then she's like attacking the committees of correspondence group for having me there asking the question.
I'm calling bullshit here. I do not think this is how this went down.
I asked, what about the state? What about the government? What about power? I don't think the Republicans are just going to go away. And then they hand the microphone to her, and she's like, oh my God, I'm treated by power and scary authoritarian men. And she's like having a meltdown. And I'm just like, what? I'd never seen anybody like that before, right?
That doesn't... I just don't see it.
And that's now, that's what all the woke protesters are. They're that, right? That was I remember thinking, what the hell is that?
Wait, what did you just say?
Authoritarian men that are gonna... And she's having a meltdown. And I'm just like, what? I had never seen anybody like that before, right? And that's now, that's what all the woke protesters are. They're that.
We all know that. I mean, we all put on our nose rings, and we go out on the street, and we do a sort of stage sob that isn't very well done.
Right? And that was I remember thinking, what the hell is that? Right? So then...
It's something you made up, Caleb.
The mic went back to the speaker, and the woman who was putting on the workshop, she looked at me, this kind of condescending smile. She's like, I thought the same thing when I was your age, young man.
Burger King.
We're not going to be storming the Winter Palace. We're not the Bolsheviks. It's going to be just a gradual process, one step at a time.
Well, I mean, let's just remember, he's very much against storming the Winter Palace, too. He's already said that, that what they're doing, it's going to be about getting elected, except, not even that. Briefly, the idea was they were going to, get elected, and then that sort of went away for, I think, obvious reasons. But now they don't really have any, this is still more of a fucking theory than they've got.
It was, what I was hearing was Bernstein, right? It was, the movement is everything, the goal is nothing. And the woman I was hearing it from, she was probably a real communist. She was just a reform. She was like a Communist Party USA revisionist, basically. She wasn't triggered by me talking about the state and all that. And she'd read all those books, and she this was a woman who remembered the 60s. This was an older woman. And she had been a real communist at one point, and she wasn't triggered by what I was saying. She just didn't believe in it anymore. She'd become a reformist social democrat. But the woman...
Well, I mean, by all accounts, you don't believe in that anymore either.
Behind me, I was like, what the hell is this, right? This woman who's older than me is she's triggered and having a meltdown by my question about state power. And that was woke. The other thing that I remember was, so I was in the Workers' World Party. And the Workers' World Party had a woman in it named, well, I shouldn't say a woman. It had a person in it who presented as male, but was, you called them she, because they wanted to raise awareness. And she was Leslie Feinberg. Leslie Feinberg was the first...
Oh, wow. I mean, previously, the last time I heard him bring up Leslie Feinberg, it was years ago, and it was proof that he couldn't possibly be transphobic because he was in the same party as Leslie Feinberg. And here he is, waxing transphobic about Leslie Feinberg.
First transgender activist in American history, and she was with them. And Leslie Feinberg was like a saint at these events. She was like a celebrity because she was the first transgender activist, and she was going around speaking in all the colleges about being transgender. And she was, in those years, she was almost having a panic attack because she supported North Korea, and she supported Iran, and she supported She was
like everybody around him,
communist.
everybody he doesn't like, is having panic attacks by any statement that he raises. Isn't that interesting? How apparently he just walks around giving people panic attacks.
Basically, and she was a Marciite, and she was horrified that the LGBT movement was turning into a vehicle to spread imperialism. And she spent the final years of her political activity before she got Lyme disease and was inactive for many years before she died. She spent like the final years of her life going around like yelling at the LGBT movement for being pro-imperialist.
Yeah, which is not the same thing as what people like him do, which is to suggest that even acknowledging that there are queer people automatically is doing an imperialism.
But even within the Workers' World Party, there was this odd culture of like you can't disagree with someone if they are more oppressed than you, right? And it was weird. And I had
he would be so at home on the Pim Tool cast.
Seen this in other communist groups. The older communist groups weren't like that. You know, the Revolutionary Communist Party, you know, they were almost the opposite, right? They had...
well, I mean, they were just a straight-up cult of personality, which kind of explains why you like them so much, Caleb.
Us going to black churches with newspapers, God is the original fascist, and, you know, they had us... We were quite insensitive.
Well, that's how you know your audience right there. If you wanna talk to people who are going to church, you tell them that God is the original fascist. That's certainly. I bet they got a lot of recruits from that.
You know, we followed the great white leader, Bob Avakian, and you know, I mean, he was the savior of black people and whatever. I mean, they were quite insensitive on racial matters. But in the Workers' World Party, there was this whole thing of like, if a woman says something and you're a man, you're not allowed to disagree with them, or you're being sexist. If a black person says something and you disagree with them and you're white...
like this is like literally, why do you need Caleb Muppet for this? This is the sort of shit that you actually get on Tim Pool already.
Then you're not allowed to do that. You're being sexist. And, you know, and you know, I was joining the group at the time, and part of the hazing in the group, if you're a white person, is they accuse you of being racist, and you know, when they don't mean it, and you have to like
wait.
You know.
Now I'm curious. I'm gonna have to. I know some people who were previously in the Workers' World Party, or maybe I think one of them possibly still is. I don't remember. I'm gonna have to ask I'm gonna have to like ask. Actually, it's funny because the guy I know who is or was in the WWP remembers Caleb Muppet from Occupy. I'm gonna have to like show him this and ask if this is at all, since they would have been in the WWP at roughly the same time, whether this is at all like this idea that there's a hazing. I mean, I could see it because these kind of like cult-like groups, they have all sorts of bullshit. But I mean, I also don't think that this is, I mean, coming from him, I sort of doubt that the veracity of it somehow, because he's full of shit.
You have to not fight back, basically. You know, it's like they test you. You know, and so, you know, I was experiencing that, and I remember, like, you know, the one time, I mean, I was not a full member, I don't think, at the time of the U.S. Social Forum.
Oh,
but
you're
I
a full
remember we
member
were planning
now.
a workshop. They had a youth workshop at the U.S. Social Forum, and I had like sent an email with like suggestions
Oh,
for the workshop.
Das ist Fränkisch. Das habe ich ja, als ich in Erlangen lebte, oder naja, im Erlanger Umland lebte, sehr oft gehört.
Should be. And then they had one of the other youth who was on the email list, who was black, a woman who was 3 or 4 years older than me, call me up on the phone.
He's really obsessed with pointing out people's relative ages when it's completely irrelevant to what he's talking about.
How did you think that was appropriate to send that email? I'm like, what do you mean? I just said that I think we should do this or that. Well, that was condescending, and we don't need your white man opinions. And
I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say, coming from him, everything is condescending. So I'm going to guess that probably they had a point.
You know, it was, you know, stuff like that.
Condescending
That
is all
was
he
just kind of
does.
the culture of the Workers' World Party. That's how they developed. I mean, it was pretty toxic, and And I learned after a while being in the group that there were just certain red lines you couldn't cross, right? I mean, you know, if they played that card, right, you had to stop talking immediately, right? You know, and that there was no defense, right? If you were saying something and then they said you're a white man, you have to shut up, you know. And I learned that the hard way, and I just learned that okay, you know, there are just certain limits of what I can do in this group, right? And I just
I mean, yeah, like you're not going to become the cult leader. You need to find for your special brand of like white resentment politics. You were going to have to create your own bullshit cult.
I was very committed to being in a communist group, and I believed in what I was doing, and you know, so it was like this was a group I could be with. They let me write for their newspaper. They let me, you know, speak at some of their conferences. And I was in Cleveland at that point, organizing. They had a newspaper I could distribute. It was just like, okay, this group has kind of an unhealthy, toxic culture. You know, there's
as opposed to a healthy, toxic culture.
A lot of internal, like, yelling at each other and stuff.
I mean, it's... As opposed to the group that he started, which has such a wonderfully healthy organizational culture, which is why he had to found it twice.
But whatever. I just thought, okay, I'll take it, you know, whatever. And then I moved to New York. That's a whole nother story. But, I mean, is that woke? Yeah.
What was the question even at this point? He's been rambling for so long. I'm just searching. Do you remember seeing the first roots of woke? Jesus. And
this was, again, before woke. This was an old school communist group that still did talk about workers control the means of production. However,
well, like lots of people who also talk about white supremacism and misogyny and shit are also talking about workers control of the means of production. You know who doesn't actually seem to be all that interested in workers control of the means of production? There's this guy. He's from Northern Ohio, kind of fucking creepy and condescending. His live streams always manage to be visually painful. And, we're watching him right now. That's somebody who doesn't seem all that interested. He's more interested in slagging off wokeism than actually doing so, than talking about workers' control of the means of production, because he doesn't want workers in charge of the means of production.
You know, fast forward 5 or 6 years, one thing that would happen in communist groups, I'm fine, Gala, much love, but one thing that would happen in communist groups, and I remember this, so people would, one thing that happens, and a lot of communist groups this happens, is like college-aged young people, they join communist groups, and they then go and get jobs at labor unions, right? The labor unions hire, like, left.
Yeah, and this is where he gets his revolutionary praxis of wearing bad suits.
Wing young people. And they hire them to be labor union staffers, labor union employees. And so there were a lot of people in the Workers' World Party who went to, like, you know, they were in college, they were in, like, the University of North Carolina or whatever, and then they got hired by hotel employees, restaurant.
Yeah, speaking of cults, have any of you played Cult of the Lamb? I've been playing that lately. You're this adorable cartoon lamb who founds a cult in order to please an undead, deposed god who's trying to make it back into the big leagues.
Restaurant employees, HERE.
It's like sort of, it's an interesting combination of like, Oxygen Not Included, Stardew Valley, like goth Stardew Valley, but with fursonas and fighting.
Or they got hired by the United Food and Commercial Workers or the AFL-CIO outright. They got hired by some labor union, right? They got hired by a labor union. And the labor unions, they do these like summer camps for their employees where they take them to, like, you know, they have the union's own property. They have, you know, and like in Michigan, I think there's a big United Auto Workers camp, right? It's just like a summer camp. You know, it's like a, I don't know what you want to call it, you know, a dacha or whatever. I mean, it's just like they have this place in Michigan. They all. And if you're going to be a UAW employee, or if you're going to be an employee of one of these unions, you go to like a place in the woods, and you do like a 2-week training program And those training programs are very woke, right? And they do the whole, if you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice, if you hear me clap 3 times, right? And they kind of like, you know, they do these kind of like group bonding activities with.
Well, yeah, I mean, is he trying to claim that UAW full-timer summer camp is the origins of woke? Because I'm going to tell you, that's probably not it.
These people, and they teach them how to organize. Or they teach them these methods of organizing that are very ineffective. I mean, the labor movement in the United States is, I mean, it's like weaker than it's ever been. So these
well,
methods,
I mean, it's actually, there's been a significant uptick in recent years, though. Because the thing is, it turns out what makes unionizing attractive to workers is seeing evidence that the union in question is willing to fight for them. The more strikes people see, the more willing they are to actually join a union. When you have unions that aren't really doing anything and that are constantly trying to avoid any kind of actual confrontation with the bosses, yeah, people don't completely see the point in that. But what really attracts people to unions, it turns out, is seeing the unions actually, like, go after the fucking bosses. That shouldn't be surprising. People, like, why are you gonna pay union dues if the union is not, like, a platform for you to actually fight for fight for your interests together with other people similarly situated?
It's a great way to organize. I mean, give me a break. We haven't seen a big victory for the labor movement since, like, the Teamsters organized UPS in 1995. Okay?
Oh, I mean, we've had a few. We had like a string of very successful wildcat strikes, both against state law and their own union bureaucracy amongst education workers in West Virginia, Oklahoma, and I'm not sure what other. There was another state too, but definitely those two. I mean, there's been a whole lot of organizing of service workers, actually. I mean, like the Starbucks union, there's actually been an uptake in organizing. One of the things that really, I will say, I mean, there could have been a huge crescendo if the railway workers hadn't had their strike broken by Joe Biden and the Democrats interceding and forcing them to accept a deal on pain of fines and potential imprisonment. A deal that they had already rejected as manifestly unacceptable. But actually, the thing is, labor militancy is actually on the uptick.
Okay, like the labor movement is very, very weak, but they have these like very textbook ways of organizing people. And they do the very infantile, if you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice. We don't raise our hand at the meeting. We have this cute little bouncy ball that we throw to people. And they do that, and the kind of infantilization of organizing. It's like 5th grade.
I mean, I'm just sort of reminded of the fact that he forced more than one member of his cult to, you wouldn't really call it, vaguely infantilizing spanking-related role play.
That people would learn that in the labor unions when they would get a union job. Their training would do that. And then they would take that into the communist group. Right, and that happened in every.
Absolutely,
they would learn this kind of like kindergarten organizing style, and then they would bring it into the communist group and be like, "Well, I learned these very new professional techniques that we have."
Motherfucker, you're the one who did a whole video on how your inspiration for how true revolutionaries should dress was the SEIU. Like, maybe you can't be slagging off fucking NGO culture. You are the worst of NGO culture.
The union, and they would bring it into the communist group, and they would start acting that way. And I am convinced, so it's been revealed that some of that stuff actually came from Scientology. right? Some of that stuff originated in
Yeah,
Scientology.
it's sort of funny that he brings up Scientology, because he's a big fan of Farrakhan. And one thing about Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam is that they made a deal with Scientology to allow themselves to be sort of a vector from which Scientology could exploit the black community. That Leah Remini Scientology documentary on Netflix, I assume it's still up there. I saw it a couple of years ago. Talks about this. There's like a whole episode on Scientology's relationship with the NOI. Yeah. For example,
that whole thing. The privilege walk is an exercise that they do at those things, where it's like, if your family had more than this
like,
amount
what the
of money,
hell does this have to do with woke? Like, woke is at this point literally anything reactionaries don't like.
you take one step forward. If you did this, then you take another step forward. And it's like it's like whoever's the furthest ahead, is the most privileged person or something. And they do these kind of like infantile, workshops, but then there's also this element of like oversharing, right? Where you talk about, very personal things, and you talk about, I don't know, it's weird.
Which is that is exclusively your cult leader's prerogative. He's supposed to overshare to you, whether you want to hear it or not.
It's like, so on the one hand, they're kind of treating you like a child. On the other hand, it kind of turns into group therapy. And then there's a real frown on actual knowledge, right? There's this feeling that...
Well, no, he would have fit in perfectly then.
Knowing facts is racist. Knowing data, being able to quote books and all of that is...
I see. I think the real problem it wasn't knowing facts or being able to quote books. It was probably the fact that you've never demonstrated that you understand any of the shit you quote, Caleb.
Making other people uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think so.
If you go to one of these, if you go to this kind of space, it's weird. It's like a method of running a group, right? And it would
it literally is a method of running a group. It literally is. It's a group, and this is how they run it. It is a method for running a group.
Democracy. They would bring it into the communist groups, and it's like, so we're all gonna, if you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice, we're gonna sit in a circle and talk about our favorite ice cream or something like that. And then
just fucking.
Then there's also, we're going to talk about like deeply emotional experiences. Women get up and talk about when they were sexually harassed and how bad they felt about it. People talk about discrimination, and it's like, so we're going to like, at the same time that we're acting like kindergarten, we're also going to get up and have people start crying while they talk about ways that they were mistreated.
Well, yeah, I mean, because that actually does make sense. I mean, it can also potentially be a toxic environment depending on how it's done. I will say that. But the thing is that if you're trying to bring people together to struggle against exploitation and oppression, helping them actually, share these are fractals. We're all experiencing these things from somewhat different angles. And one thing that can help people, potentially come together in that struggle is to talk about the ways that it has affected them. I mean, that is potentially a completely sensible thing to do. It's all in how you do it.
And then there's also, if you know anything, that is, no, we don't do that here.
Oh, well, I mean... that he must have felt very comfortable there. I mean, he does well in places where knowing anything isn't something they do.
Right? If you know actual data about the economy and how it's organized, no, we don't do that here. If you've read...
I tried to tell them all about the tractors that the Soviet Union manufactured in 1924, and they didn't want to hear about it.
Marxist books, you understand facts about Lenin and history. No, we don't do that here. We do these kind of kindergarten bonding activities. We cry a lot and talk about our painful childhood memories. And then, and it is some kind of CIA thing. I'm convinced.
Well, I mean, and I will say, like, he's talking about an organization whose main claim to fame is that they will, like, buy up lots of permits and then use that to justify controlling a march that, millions of other people are participating in. And their entire praxis is A to B marches and fucking paper sales and stuff.
This came from the intelligence agencies. It's some kind of brainwashing thing that they developed. And it's really anti-intellectual. It is like knowing anything about communism, knowing anything about...
Well, I mean, again, you demonstrably don't know anything about communism. That's the thing. That's what people go to you for. You're the guy who doesn't know anything about communism. Well, one of them. You're the guy who doesn't know anything about communism and talks about it in a very annoying, condescending voice. And doesn't know about the fucking rule of thirds either. Hey, Riveroon. Yeah, communism's when tractor goes up. But I notice it is time to wrap up. Thank you to everyone who joined in. Always good to see you. Badger, if you're still there, glad to see you there. I hope you joined the Discord. We can talk about like language learning stuff as well. That is one of my favorite subjects, actually. But I will be back on Friday at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you there. In the meantime, look at the way he sets up this video, and remember never to set up a video like that. This is painful to watch. His fucking bookshelf is what's in focus here. Well, nearly in focus. That's not even in focus. Nothing's in focus. How do you set up a shot like this that nothing's in focus? Have a good